first of all, we'd like to introduce you to a new member of the organisation. Gethin, if you'd like to come and join us. So Gethin Williams is the new Director for Development and Engagement.
Hello everyone. That's quite an introduction. I'm not going to say too much because I think you need to hear from my colleagues probably more than me. I'm only 4 weeks into post, so I'm very, a little bit green still probably around the ears and learning, but really grateful to be here today and have an opportunity to meet you all very early on. I'm sure Amanda's strategy will cover a little bit about what I'm here for, but I look forward to talking to many of you over the course of lunch and throughout the afternoon, so thank you very much.
It's really lovely to be here. I've had a interesting couple of weeks of conferences because I was at Labour Party conference last week in Brighton and I was at the Tories in Manchester earlier this week. So when I say it is lovely to be here at this conference, I do really mean it. So it's great to be here. So Sue asked me to tell you a little bit about Contact a Family's strategy for the next 5 years, but she only gave me a few minutes in which to do it. So I'm sure you're delighted to hear that I'm not going to go through it line by line. I just want to give you a sense of direction of travel for the organisation and to start a conversation with you really about how we can best work together to support families over the next 5 years. So the strategy looks like this, and you're all very welcome to take a copy. Sets out really the next chapter in our story as an organisation. And the starting point, I guess, is my belief that it's really important for an organisation to stay true to its story. And as I look around the room, I think Contact a Family's founding story is probably quite similar to some of your organisations. The language has changed and the clothes have changed, but otherwise there will be some parallels. So we started, as some of you know, in the 70s in South London with one community worker called Noreen, and Noreen's job was to bring families together and to support them to do what it was that they wanted to do. And those families were quite isolated at that time, so they started off with coffee mornings, family events, and quite soon there emerged a need for good quality information and advice for those families, and as they grew in confidence, they started to want to influence services and to campaign. So that's where we come from. So in terms of how that affects our future and the next 5 years, I think we carry that story through in two ways, in how we work and in what we do. In terms of the how, it wasn't called co-production, I don't think, in the 70s, but that is very much our founding ethos as an organisation. And I know we don't always get it right, and there's a lot more that we can do. But what strategy contains really is an ambition, an aspiration, a commitment to be great at working in partnership with others, and in particular to work in partnership with families. And I'm sure you will pick us up when we make mistakes, and that's a really valuable role. In terms of the what, in a nutshell, it's a difficult climate out there, but the population of families with disabled children is growing, and I want us to be ambitious about what we can do. And so over the next 5 years, we want to reach and be there for more families. And we need to do that in a way that's financially viable so that we're there for families in the future as well as families today. So we're going to build on the kind of key things that we do. And that means, so I think Contact a Family does three things. Information, advice and support to families from the beginning of the journey to help families make the decisions that are right for them and for their families. But we know that other families are often the best source of support. So we want to develop our linking work. So that involves our support for you, our support for local groups, for rare conditions groups, and to link families in different ways, perhaps online and in other formats, and try and make sense of how our support for those networks can have most impact. And finally, this is quite an apt piece to talk to you about, I suppose. We want to give families the opportunity, when they're ready and in their own way, to give back. And that's about recognising, as you know, that families have strengths as well as needs. And that might be giving back in terms of lending voice to national campaigns. It might be supporting families to get more involved in the fantastic work that you do. And it might be providing more opportunities for families to volunteer and fundraise for our information and advice services, because none of that runs on fresh air. So going forward, we want to develop our work in those areas and try and make it more coherent as an offer to families and link together better. So that's all I'm going to say about strategy. Just very briefly what that means, what it might mean for how we work together. I've just got a sort of a commitment, a question and a statement really, which I can't quite read on the laptop, but the commitment is that supporting parent-carer participation is core to our work over the next 5 years. And I look forward to working with you and with the department on building a sustainable basis going forwards. The question or invitation really is, we'd be really interested in talking to you as we develop our information, advice and family support services, and thinking about how we can work together to not to duplicate effort, but to get information out to families in a way that suits them and provides them with what they need. So it would be interesting in talking to you about that further over the next year. And finally, I believe that the experience of families with disabled children should have a higher political profile than it currently has. So I'm keen to work with partners to develop a stronger voice for families politically in government and in Parliament. That might be something you engage with more as individuals than as forums, perhaps, but it's something I wanted to flag as an area of work for over the next year. I just wanted to leave you with a thought, really, because I think because I've been at the political party conferences recently, it occurred to me that there are parallels between them and us. And I was thinking on the train on the way back from Manchester about an anecdote that a great supporter of disability rights, Lord Don Toohey, told me. Lord Toohey has a family connection to autism, and he talked to me about doing a sort of fact-finding mission to the southern states in America, where they were looking at strength of local democracy as a sort of a Labour Party thing, I think. And he talked about going into this town hall in one of those southern states, and there was like this big stage, probably a little bit like this, and all these dignitaries and the mayor, all in their robes and in their finery. And at the back of the hall, there was a big swag, and in gold letters, it said, the world is run by the people who turn up. And you'd only have to spend a little bit of time at political party conferences to know that that is true. But also, the point I wanted to make is that you are the people who turn up. And I know it's been a really tough year for forums. The expectation and the reality of SEN reform. Lots of you are facing cuts to local services and dealing with your own frustration and then the frustration of other families. And I do appreciate how tough a job you do. But what I wanted to say is, don't lose sight of the power and the value of being the people that turn up, of hanging on in there, on having that voice around the table. And if you look at the political parties, the political strategists or activists would give anything to have sort of the level of commitment that there is in this room. And also, although we fall out from time to time, or and we have our disagreements. That kind of unity of purpose in terms of wanting a better world for families and disabled children is a unity and a focus that, well, certainly the Labour Party could only dream of right now. So I guess this is an opportunity to step back and kind of recognise the strength and the power of what we are as a movement, even though it probably doesn't feel like that on an individual level sometimes. So thank you, and I'm going to hand over to Sue.
I'm just going to really quickly do the update from the parent participation team. And like I say, I'm hoping that lots of you will know at least some of the initial stuff, so I will be brief. First of all, I just wanted to say I can't believe how time has flown and we're already halfway through this financial year. It always seems to go faster every year. And we obviously continue to be contracted by the Department for Education to provide support to forums, but our contract looked a bit different this year. And that was in part because it combined the contract to support parent carer forums and to administer the grant with the helpline that Contact a Family run. And also we continue to offer some support for the national network. So that's changed a little bit the amount of money that we had for the different elements of work that we've done previously, and led to some of the changes that we wrote to everybody about, particularly around the learning and development offer. But what we were really pleased to be funded for this year, in addition to the usual work we do, is 2 specific projects around supporting participation in health and around short breaks, and Ben and Sarah are here to talk about that in a little bit more detail. But our offer remains that there are a team of us that provide a range of support, advisors, a named advisor for each forum, and continuation of the administration of the grants. So while we're talking about the grants, just to remind everybody that we are now open for the second tranche application of your grant. There is a really strict deadline of the 16th of November, so if you don't have your application in before then, we will assume you do not require the second part of your grant, unless you talk to us about that. If there's an issue and a difficulty, do talk to us. The reason we have that really strict deadline is because any money that forums don't use, we put into the discretionary pot, and we then open that up to other forums who can use a bit extra. So that's why we have to be really strict, because we don't want for any money to have to be returned and not used to support participation, even if it's in different forums, in different areas, in different ways. We did add in this year the extraordinary grant process, which is finished now, so I'm not going to talk about that too much, but that did give the opportunity for us to provide a very small amount of support that promoted participation for groups or for individual parent carers where they might face additional barriers to participation, and also to support that regional participation that the East of England team talked about earlier, and so has helped them with their work. So please get your application in for your second part of your grant. If your monitoring hasn't yet been approved because we're still waiting for either a proof or a little bit more information, again, please make sure we get that as soon as possible, because we can't approve your second grant tranche until we've signed off your monitoring from last year. If you've got any questions or queries about that, please talk to your advisor. So I did mention earlier that obviously our learning and development programme has kind of shrunk a little bit this year, and we aren't offering any of the face-to-face training, which we know was really valuable for lots of forums, but was a very costly kind of provision. And obviously forums are still able to use your own grants to purchase training for your forums, and perhaps to work with your neighbouring forums and purchase training between you, if that is helpful. But what we have been able to continue to offer are the webinars, and we certainly, they enable more people to participate in those. So there is a leaflet in your pack about the webinars that are coming up, so please look out for your invitations to join them. There's really not a limit on how many people can join. Even if you can't actually join the webinar, they're normally uploaded about a week later on the website, so you can watch them retrospectively even if you are not available at the time that they're running. I did just want to alert people to the fact that we're hoping in the week of the 9th for Ofsted to deliver a webinar specifically for forums around the consultation for the new inspection framework that's being proposed for local authorities. And Anne mentioned that briefly earlier. And I think from ourselves at Contact to Family and from the National Network, that it's a really key and important document to ensure that as many forums respond to, and that as many individual parents who may want to respond also have the opportunity to respond to, because that inspection framework is really going to be one of the key accountability frameworks for local authorities that perhaps are not engaging as well in the reforms as we might like, where they will be held to account. So your views and your thoughts about that are really important. That isn't out for consultation as yet, and so as soon as it is, and as soon as Ofsted are able to confirm that date, we will let everybody know as soon as possible. And please do try and join in with that, or have a look at the framework when it's out. And the National Network, I'm sure, will be formulating a response collectively as well. I did just want to say to you all a huge big thank you for filling in your SEND surveys and the issues log. And again, I know Anne said it earlier, but you know, we know that the SEND surveys have kind of grown in size over the last 18 months. And we know that we often don't give you very much notice of when they are, and then that's often really not helpful to forums. And unfortunately, some of that is, you know, we would give you as much notice as we have of them. Please be assured of that. But I did really want to just re-emphasise the huge impact that your responses have in terms of the support and challenge that is then provided to your local authority area. So we really appreciate the fact that you have completed them. There will be another SEND survey coming in November. It is going to be much shorter. So I can see some people groaning. That's why I kind of had to have the little baby picture there, because I know it's kind of SEND surveys. But it is a really, really important way to make sure that your own forums' thoughts, responses and views about the reforms in your individual local area are heard directly by the Department for Education, and it has had a huge impact on the support that's been provided. But I did just want to acknowledge that, you know, we obviously, from reading the SEND surveys, from hearing your thoughts about the issues logs, we know that this is a really hard time for forums. We know that local authorities are experiencing some significant challenges in terms of their efficiencies and the cuts that they're having to make. We know that for forums, they're facing challenges in terms of your own membership. You know, we certainly know of areas where key members of your own forums have decided they need to focus on their own children and their own situations. And I just want you to know that we hear that, and we hear how challenging and difficult it is, and we want to continue to offer as much support as we can to you. I think the other thing that we recognise this year as well is that we have certainly seen forums receive more challenge from other parents and other local groups in your own areas. And I think that's because the profile of forums has become much more visible. I think the influence that forums has become more visible. And we really want to support you as much as we can with that, because we know that for most of you as forums, you know, you're working on the contributions from your volunteers in the most effective ways that you can. So, you know, please talk to your advisors if you're experiencing challenges and difficulties and need any advice and support. And I just wanted to remind you the forum handbook is out. I think for us, if we are drawn into issues around that, often what it demonstrates are challenges that forums have around their governance. So please do have a look in the handbook if if your forum's having any difficulties that you think there might be some useful information in there about. We have tried to make sure that forums have received a hard copy of that. It's obviously available on the website, and we've got a few hard copies out at the back as well if you want it. And keep your eyes open on the joint bulletin as well, because there's lots of useful information in there. Also wanted to let you know about something new that we're going to be doing this year, and one of the benefits really of us joining with the Helpline. And I have to say that this proposal, this suggestion, came from trying to find the forum representative who worked with us as we were thinking about the support offer in the bid this year, and whose good idea this was, about the fact that through our helpline at Contact a Family, we have access to information from parents across your local areas about the key issues and themes that are affecting them that might be of use to you in your engagement and your work with your local authorities. So one of the things that we talked about doing this year is that on a termly basis, we would provide to you individually for your local forum some information about the calls that have been received by the helpline, not in any way that identifies people who have made calls, but just the themes that are being raised, so that you can then use that in your work. So what we'll be sending to you next week, individually to your forum, is a form that will have these 3 graphs on, one of which tells you what the national issues are, one of which tells you what the regional issues are, and one of which will tell you what your local issues are. And we'd be really keen to hear from you if that is helpful or if it's not helpful. And if you've got any comments or thoughts about that, please do let us know. And also, just to remind you, and there's a little card in your wallet files about the information line. Obviously, the information line provides information and advice to individual parent carers. So lastly, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to you all just for hanging in there and keeping going. And please don't underestimate the huge impact that you have locally, regionally, and nationally. Thank you very much.